The flying in Broadhead, it's been going on, I can't tell you how many years, 25, 30 maybe. And it really is just a bunch of peat and Paul enthusiasts. Some are building, some want to build, some have them, and they fly in and they just talk, tech talk, and it's a bunch of guys that are catty, you know. It's a social thing.
And it's all done in a spirit of friendliness in a little happy country town in southern Wisconsin. And that really is the appeal of the whole thing. We have a saying here at Broadhead that the people come here for the first time to see the airplanes, and they come back because of the people. So you'll see people around here that have been here for many, many years. They renew their acquaintance every year here.
And it happens once a year, and it happens the weekend before Oshkosh. So then they fly to Broadhead, Wisconsin, and then to Oshkosh and make a week of it. And I'd say it's a good knowledge transfer. And people who want to start building them, they go there and they learn so much.
And it's just a good opportunity for everybody to compare notes as to how they built their airplane and what they're doing with it and how long it took them to build it. Mine took 7 years, mine took 12. I bought half of it and fixed it all up.
You cannot buy a kit to build a peat and pole. If you want to build a peat and pole, especially a wood peat and pole, you have to go down to the lumber yard and talk to the lumberman and get the proper kind of wood, take it home and saw it up, glue it together according to the plans.
And I sent away for the plans and saw one partly under construction, but I never flew one until I finished my first peat and pole. And it was just a lot of fun, both building and flying it.
It's a fun airplane.
Yeah.
It's just to get in the air and enjoy, and that way you get rid of any inhibitions of what's going on today. It's a stress reliever. Get away from the rat race in life.
Yeah.
Get rid of your stresses.
And it turns into a pretty good sized gathering.
It's neat to see people appreciate the simplistic design.
I never imagined it would get to come to anything like this. It indeed is phenomenal, to me anyway.
Yeah, me too.
There he is. This particular little corner of the museum is dedicated to my dad and his airplanes, to do what we want to do with it or to put in what we want to put in. And so the information that's on the walls has been submitted by various people that either knew my dad or experiences with it and so forth.
This is a nice tribute with a picture and his the dates in which he built his first plane and touch points on when he adapted to the Corvair engine and in Preston Airport there's actually a building that houses a copy of this picture, and they dedicated the building to him back in, I think, 1981 or something like that. Mm-hmm. We've got a good selection of his blueprints. It's nice that people can see these on display and see how simple they are. Really.
In aviation circles, when you're an aircraft mechanic or an A&E, the FAA issued designee license, in which if you were a selected mechanic and so forth, you could relicense airplanes. And that's the certificate that he got from that. Every once in a while you'll run across in something that you read about Mr. Pete and Paul being the father of the home-built aviation movement. This was the award that was given to him by EAA, and in the bottom lines it says in here, considered to be the father of home-built aviations. I've never heard anyone dispute it. It's just universally says, here's the guy that made it possible to build an airplane at home.
And here we've got some original jigs. I think I had these for a while, that he used for many years in building his aircraft. He built 23 air campers total. And
if you lay the proper size stick into those grooves,
yeah,
and glue them all together, and then take them out, you wind up with that.
one of these up there. It takes 28 of those to build one plane. And when I was growing up, I can remember wearing this jacket all the time. This is sort of like a shop jacket, and I can remember the hat.
These are letters, most letters and envelopes, but they are kind of novel of the pictures that people put on things. And these are on orders that people ordered plans. And they're from various countries and various places like this. And the photographs and the pictures and the stamps are where they all come from. I mean, it's a lot of work to make an envelope that looks like that. And this one from Canada. Well, I put it this way. I say that I have sent plans to every English-speaking country in the world. And that includes the ones in South Africa, where you talk to Tasmania, or any country in the world that speaks English, I sent plans to.
And I have a quarterly newsletter, and it talks about people's successes with the planes they're building, the air camper. And here are two examples of the actual aircraft he built.
It's unlocked, isn't it?
Yeah. This is a Model A engine. Same engine that came out of a Model A automobile. And he proved that you could put it in a plane and it would fly. And over here is a more modern example, and this is powered by an A65 Continental. And you can see there's only 23 inches across, actually not even that, 22 inches across, shoulder to shoulder. And but yet, that's what makes it fly good, is it's light.
When properly constructed, it's only 580 pounds.
These are doors that fold back onto themselves. It's big enough to get the air camper inside, and a person would pull, after the doors were open, a person would pull this panel out, and then the wheels of the airplane would go through there, and the wings above, and that's how it was done. Such a small community with an 8th grade education could do all of this. And I've had so many, hundreds and hundreds of people tell me they can remember my grandfather and how they were so delighted to get a ride after church on Sunday. And they would go out and he would give rides to anyone just to have them experience it.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the first airplane that my dad built, not the first one he built, but a different definition. He says, this is the first successful airplane I ever built. And I asked him one day, I says, what do you mean by success? And he says, that's when you land in the same field from where you took off. And this is that airplane. That airplane was built, can't even tell you the year for certain, but it was in the fall. And he flew it on Labor Day. My dad had a tradition of that, always to fly on Labor Day. He did that for 52 years, always flying an airplane on Labor Day. "50, 60, 70 years ago, we didn't have the radios. A lot of things weren't available, and the airplanes are extremely easy to fly. And my dad made these things to be extremely easy to fly. And he would get them to the point, and he was always, to a certain degree, afraid, what if the ailerons don't work? Or what if the elevator cable breaks? Or what if the rudder don't work? So he said I would practice without using a particular control. He says, I found out that I could, if I wanted to make the nose of the airplane to go down, I could stick both hands on out each side of the pilot, and the nose would go over. I could come down. He says, if I wanted to climb, he says, I found out I could take my helmet off and put it over the trailing edge of the airplane, and the airplane would climb. If I held out one arm, I could turn that way. If I held out the other arm, he says, I could fly this airplane completely. And he says, not only that, I practiced. I'd come around and make landings and takeoffs without using the controls. Stock market dropped in '29. My father started building airplanes at about 26 or 27. And by the time the 30s or 29 and 30s rolled around, no one had any money. And those people who want to fly wanted something to build themselves. And there were airplane names by Cessna and Beechcraft and Travel Air, and all these people had been building airplanes when there was money. But airplanes, even in those days, in those Depression dollars, were like $35,000. An engine was $5,000. This is more money than people would make in 10 years.
Yeah.
A farm could be bought, several farms could be bought for those numbers. So these are things that were totally beyond anyone's dream. And then to come along and have somebody make something that could be built out of going to the hardware store and buying nuts and bolts and screws and galvanized iron, go to J.C. Penney's and buy what they called in those days unbleached muslin for probably 30 cents a yard, put this all together and assemble something that actually flew for less than $300 and $400. This, compared to $35,000, is just, if you could buy a kit today and go downtown and buy a car for $35, it was brand new, you'd do it. My dad sold a lot of plans in the 30s. The government hadn't really specified anything about home-built airplanes or anything else like that at that time. And it was a very popular thing. And call it reverse engineering, if you will. My mother did all of the writing for my dad on answering letters and so forth. And my folks never threw a letter away.
Really?
And in the house where I grew up, there were boxes and boxes and boxes of letters from all over the world. There was a section in the Modern Mechanics magazine devoted to aviation. And they would write articles about who's doing what and so forth. One of the articles in the magazine said, by someone of notoriety saying, an automobile engine will never fly. So my dad wrote him a letter, and he says, automobile engines do fly. In fact, I have 2 of them flying right now. And if you want, I'll fly them up there. Well, I suppose they thought it was kind of a strange thing. But my dad had 2 airplanes and only 1 pilot. So he taught Don Finke to fly the day before they went up to the cities. That story I didn't know about until about 3 years ago. Someone was telling me, he says, yeah,
Really?
I need a pilot and I need one quick, so I'm going to teach you how to fly. So they flew 2 airplanes up there, answered your question. And the editor of Popular Mechanics, whose name was Wesley Farmer, who wrote this article, was so impressed. He says, draw the plans, I'll publish it. Those are the plans. And that was the magazine that Andrew showed you that has it in there.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of it. And the plans were $7.50 for a set of plans. You say, wow. Most people weren't making $1 a day. It's well over a week's work for these drawings.
Yeah.
My dad showed me a check one day. Oh, this is a number of years back. And the check was for $400 from Popular Mechanics, from royalties on the magazine and the plans they had sold. My dad showed me this receipt for this check. He says, that's the first money I ever had. The shop was $200 and here's the check for $400.
Was he pretty proud of that?
Oh yeah, he kept that receipt and showed it to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can remember what it was like when I could fly, but I can remember my dad giving me flight instructions when I was 6 years old.
How did that go?
Great.
What did he say?
I don't know. My dad would let me do almost anything on that order.
Yeah.
There was discipline in my house, but when it came to something mechanical or to fix something or to understand it, he pushed me.
Yeah.
And I was quite a competent pilot by the time I was 9 years old, but my head would only stick over the thing that far. And my dad and I would go someplace with an airplane, and he'd let me fly, but I couldn't see where I was going because I couldn't see over the front of the airplane. But I could see over here, and I could see over this way, and didn't use maps or anything. And we'd go somewhere, and then when we'd get there, we'd take off and fly home. And my dad would let me fly, and I'd fly home. My dad was part of the community. There were no roads in those days that you could traverse in winter. I grew up looking out our window, looking into the yard and seeing an airplane that my dad had built. The neighbors took the fence out between our property and this field that they normally have grain in. My dad would drain the oil out of the airplane and the water out of the airplane, or press stone as it would be, took it into the shop and set it on top of one of these pot-bellied stoves and kept it hot.
Oh no, warmed it up.
Kept it warm.
Jeez.
And the reason for this was if somebody got sick in Cherry Grove and it's 12 miles of snow, my dad would go in the shop and pour hot oil into the engine, hot press stone in the radiator, start the engine and fly him to the doctor. And he always had an airplane sitting in the yard every winter when I grew up for that purpose. Now you ask me, is he part of the community? Yes.
Wow.
It's a plane my grandfather designed. It truly is a common man's airplane. You can really, truly build it with just the tools in your garage and the parts at the hardware store.
I grew up looking out our window, looking into the yard and seeing an airplane that my dad had built. I've asked my father sometimes in his past, how did you know how to do this? How did you know how to build an airplane? And his answer to me was always the same. I always knew how. He didn't study it, he didn't go to school for it, he didn't buy books for it, he just sat down with a piece of paper.
He had to teach himself to fly. No one could teach him.
All of these things are hand done, hand built, all put together, and they all flew. That was the beginning of it.
Every Pete and Paul is different. Everybody puts his or her own signature on the airplane when they build it.
Anyone can learn how to fly, and anyone can learn how to build these planes. And a lot of people do.